Hi, everybody. On behalf of the University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee and the Center for 21st Century Studies, I'd like to welcome you here. My name's Kennan Ferguson, but our first real invitation is going to be by the Chancellor of the University, Margaret Noda.
Good afternoon. How are you? Great. Well, what a great event that we've got. What a wonderful representation we have of participants from the campus, the community, other campuses, and truly around the world. We've got a lot of individuals who are joining us this afternoon, and distinguished authors and scholars. So it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Center of 21st Century Landbody Conference, Center of 21st Century Studies Landbody Conference. This center, as you probably know, is not only nationally known, it's truly internationally known. I can say that because as we've gone through some budgetary challenges, I have heard from individuals around the world about the importance of this center and how we have to uphold it and what it really means to a lot of individuals. So you have a global impact, and your participation is something that is well recognized in terms of the contributions and the impact that it has had. This conference wouldn't be possible, as you probably can appreciate, knowing some of the individuals, but I want to extol many individuals here and talk about the hard work and the remarkable organizing committee. This committee includes Kennan, who you met, Kennan Ferguson. He's the director for the Center for 21st Century Studies. We have Ali Sperling, who's the deputy director of the center. We have also on the committee Kim Blazer, Summer Drake, Carrie Miller, Margaret Noda, Marina Paradise, and Bernard Purley. Please join me in thanking and recognizing their great work. I believe that it's essential that we embrace opportunities like those in the conference. We can come together, remind ourselves of events like these that are at the core of the life of the university. The life of the university is a life of the mind and of humanity. No doubt you will be carrying that forward through the many conversations that you'll have during this conference and beyond. On any given day, I'm engaged in many conversations about budgets, academic planning, and the challenges that face higher education today. As just an example, I was this morning helping kick off a program that brought together many engineers, many government funding sources, many others from industry. I was with the students doing a kickoff for a program called Black Lives Matter, bringing together some of our honor students and social engagements that they've had to put together some remarkable areas, remarkable content, remarkable history and study of this movement. In contrast to that, then I had to go do, I call it budget battle, with some of our friends from system and folks making a lot of decisions about the state. The point that I'm making is that those conversations are always going to continue. They're going to intersect with the types of things to support activities like this. And we need to continue to have conversations about the intersection of humanities, arts, and sciences, both social and natural. They're equally important, and they're vitally enriching to us as individuals and to our society as a whole. I think some of you know my background, where I was both a business undergraduate and an English undergraduate major, and I often tend to look back and say where I learned to think, where I learned to have critical appreciation, certainly in terms of how to scan through poetry, or certainly in terms of how to critically evaluate multiple semesters of Shakespeare and other wonderful works. That's where I really learned and had an appreciation for the life of the mind, and beyond that, as I just toured before this, the Writing Center, and had discussion with what they're doing, really how to write and how to think. Some, of course, would wonder if I learned anything truly about how to think, but that's still an open question. UW-Milwaukee is indeed committed to the higher education needs and interests of our native students. One example is the work that many of you have done to build a strong American Indian Studies program. Margaret Noda, who is leading our Electaquini Institute, she has been a particular influence with her efforts to preserve valuable knowledge that can be embedded in rare languages such as Anishinaabe Mone. Offering Anishinaabe Mone, Ojibwe, regularly is vital. And let's also recognize the great diversity of native languages and the people here and the connection to UW-Milwaukee's identity. and explaining the meaning of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and other names. Margaret, thank you for your work and recognizing what we have all done. If my pronunciation is a little slow on those, please forgive me. It doesn't exactly roll off my tongue as naturally as I wish it did. Understanding the history of our people, of all people of this land, is linked to fields that study thoughts, texts, histories, languages, and cultures. This makes it possible for us to build a deeper comprehension of our connection to others in our university, in our city, in our Native American community, and across the globe. We need ongoing research in these areas, and more broadly, the humanities, not simply for preservation, but because those fields are critical to the success of UWM and our students, our community, and far beyond in the decades ahead. Thank you, and best wishes for an invigorating conference.
I'd like to start this conference off with two recognitions, both linked to the themes that we'll be talking about in the next few days. The first is increasingly familiar in North America, but still lacking in some other parts, and that is the acknowledgement and recognition of the original inhabitants of this land, the land upon which the university and the city are built. The Menominee, the Ho-Chunk, the Potawatomi, the Fox, the Mascoutin, the Sauk, and many others who traveled, traded, lived, and loved here. They were here from time immemorial, and these are, above all else and before all else, their lands. And for too long, it has been too easy to forget that fact. The second recognition is of a First Nations man, name unknown at least to me, from the unceded territory of the West Coast. 2 months ago, at a conference bringing together the Vancouver government and the Indigenous community, he raised his voice immediately after someone had given a recognition a little like the one I just gave. Stop it. Stop saying that. You keep saying that, he said, but you're still here. And he has a point. One of my own touchstones in thinking about land comes from the concept of Inak-Anig-Awin, an Anishinaabe-Mone term usually translated simply as law, but also encompassing agreement and judgment. Like U.S. law, it governs. It helps one discover what is allowed and not allowed, encouraged and discouraged. But unlike U.S. law, Inak-Anig-Awin concerns relationships. It's a complex set of obligations amongst and between people. In fact, not only people either. It also includes non-human animals, water, earth, the past, and the future. Law in this model is relational and processes not so much of textual interpretation as it is of listening, responding, and understanding. So one set of questions, especially for those of us steeped in the normative presumptions of settler colonialism, concerns law and land. What do we owe it? How are we connected to it? There's clearly a problem with some of the ways land is understood conceptually. On the one hand, it can be drained of all meaning, understood merely as a resource, a neutral, passive, recursive, dead object. Let's call this the European model. I would use that rather than the Western model because even the term West seems to ignore everybody further west than, say, London. On the other hand, it can be seen as entirely conclusive, where it defines and delineates everything, over-determining identity and possibility. Without it, one is nothing. While this is a danger for some indigenous groups, for example, when people who leave traditional lands are seen as betrayers or non-entities, this too is embedded in U.S. jurisprudence. Think of the idea of birthright citizenship, where a baby born in Mexicali is denied the rights and opportunities given to a baby born in Calexico. We might call this the autochthonous model, the one in which land is, at a fundamental level, us. It's my suspicion, my hope, that we find in many native philosophies a way out of this particular trap. I'll suggest another philosophical subject as a sort of consort concept, that of matter and bodies. European philosophy has long struggled with the recognition of embodiment in thought. From Plato onward, the material world, including our own physicality, was seen as suspicious by European philosophy, a malformed or degenerate place that operated only as a shadow of a more perfect realm, the world of the sacred or the ideal. More recently, for example, in the last couple of hundred years, such philosophy has been forced to contend with the physicality of us, whether that be scientific materialism, to being, to existence, to phenomenology, to bodies that matter. This may at times have been overdone, an overreaction, but the central point continued that we are more than disembodied minds, that the world is more than abstract ideas. There really hasn't been as strong of a parallel insistence on the philosophical nature of emplacement. Even if we are not minds, infinitely separate from bodies, there's still a sense of us as liberal individuals, completely separable from our birthplace, our communities, our landscapes. And on the other hand, Native American and many other indigenous ontologies and epistemologies have never lost the central role of land and its role in collective identities. And if there ever was a possibility of forgetting, the settler colonial state was around to remind everyone how much it wanted that land at any price. So it's here that ideas such as Inakanigawen become important. They show how the I and the we and the here and the now are all imbricated complexly. The point is more than merely useful as a philosophical concept. It's true. Not only does European philosophy have much to learn from it, but so does international law, governments in sovereign relations to one another, all individuals and collectivities who have a felt relation to place. And it allows some of us to recognize aspects of land which fall away under the European dead land or the autochthonous models. That land is always both present and distant, that there are erotic relationships to the land, or even that the literal disappearance of indigenous lands in the tundra, in the South Pacific, in the Mississippi Delta, as a result of climate change, is a connected and social and collective responsibility. And yet, how to talk about land as central? This too can be overdone. It's as misleading to reduce peoples to land as to separate them from it. People have always moved, found new lands, new peoples, new experiences. This is not, in other words, a reclaiming of the past, a fixing of identity and location, or an absolutist geography. One does not stop being who one is in exile or diaspora or mere travel. It's my hope then that the next few days can be a deep conversation about the relationships between indigeneity and the material history, physicality, and Inakanigawen of land. I would like to thank many of the same people that Chancellor Mone just thanked who've made this possible, especially people who work in the Center for 21st Century Studies, Annette Hess, John Bloom, and Ahmed Taleb. With special gratitude to Allison Sperling, who has made this entire process very possible. I'd like to also thank the Planning and Organizing Committee. And finally, I'd like to thank my predecessor at the Center for 21st Century Studies, Richard Grusin, who stepped down from his position a little less than a year ago. So please, let's thank everybody who helped make this possible. Finally, before I introduce Kim Blazer, who is a professor in the English department at UW-M, the Wisconsin Poet Laureate, a virtuoso in language, the author of a half-dozen books of poetry and prose, including one on our first plenary speaker, we're going to hear from two other people who deserve special thanks and mention. One is Carrie Miller, who's the Director of American Indian Studies at UW-M, and also the person who first suggested the design for the conference. If you want to talk to her about the design that you see on the posters and on the program. She's written extensively on it, as actually has our first plenary speaker in the book Fugitive Poses. He has a description of some of the representation and misrepresentation of the image that you'll see on the front and back of the program. The second person who'll come up after her is Meg Newton, who's the director of the Electa Quinney Institute, which serves as a vital resource for both Native students and faculty here. One of the things that Meg will be doing is reading aloud a bit of a translated prayer, which you're about to have handed to you on a card. We'll explain the details of the card tomorrow morning, so bring it back then, hold on to it. Come back with it, and we'll go into a little bit more about it, but it's very important that you hear in Anishinaabe Mone the language of the words that are on it. So first, Carrie.
Bojo, Carrie Miller, Director of American Indian Studies, at an institution that I'm very proud to say has supported us in developing not just a certificate, but a major. And when I was asked to help guide our faculty to thinking about a major, I said, we can't have a legitimate major without the language. And we can't teach the language legitimately unless we make Indigenous language a tenurable area, that our faculty needed to have that same respect we give to other areas. So when we talk about the kind of relationships that are fundamental to understanding an Indigenous way of thinking, that certainly are going to be expressed in the language that Meg is going to share with you in the moment, I certainly wanted to take the opportunity to thank our administration and to thank everyone here who has supported our program and created that network with us here in our place. So with that, I'll invite up Margaret Noda.
Chancellor Mone, so I would say thanks to you from me, but also thanks from us to you. I think the support that we've found in the American Indian Studies program here has been just remarkable, and it's something of national note, and our students feel it. I think we see success in places that are really meaningful to us. So I was handed something in English to read, but then I was sitting with my elder companion and teacher, Alphonse Pitawanacook, who visited. He teaches elsewhere, and he's visiting so we can combine curriculum. And of course he says, quick, write it down, all of it in Anishinaabe one. So, Jibwa Machtayang Kui Makormatagos and Ayaya Anishinaabe Akingia, what Chija Shigomingoanongwa. Before we start, we want to acknowledge we're in the homeland of many American Indian communities, both ancestral and contemporary. Gamana Dandamananik, Anishinaabe, we Jigabawataying, we Kidding, we Bizinching, Ejikidong, Miigwechwegeng. We will honor our American Indian hosts by taking a moment to listen and say in Anishinaabe when an expression of thanks. So, Dapanan, take your card from the Zinagas, and the drawings are connected to really. You'll hear more about it tomorrow, but Bernie Purley, who I have tons of fun having all kinds of trouble, decolonization here on campus, and the beautiful, beautiful drawings are his work. And then he gave us a Maliseet version of things, which I actually gave. The credit for the sentences goes to my second-year students, who said, now how have we learned to view this environment? So the sentences and sentiments are theirs. So you all have to read them with us, right? So the front is easy. This is sun. Jesus. Jesus. Okay. Then on the back is the word I had just said to thank everyone. So we start from the middle on everything. I'll let you practice. So miigwech. Miigwech is thanks. So to say it properly, as if we were thanking the sun, who we consider animate, you say, Gemegwetchwigo. Jesus. Zagiasigayan. Miigo. Gijosian. And you can see what that means. We'll leave that resonating. Gemegwetchwigo. Shall I introduce Kim, who's coming up now? Miwa Nijikwea Kim Blazer, Chipwa, Jabat Moss, Wisconsin, now Jabat Gawa, Bobby Gunnicog, Minnesota, Gable. I always like introducing her because she's someone I've known and admired for a very long time, and also from the northern part of Minnesota. And so Kim Blazer, will turn it over to you now.